Hello, I am Henry Crawford, and welcome to Poets versus the Pandemic. This is the second in our series devoted to poets whose books have come out during this time of coronavirus and sheltering in place. Tonight, we're featuring Nadia Colburn, who will be reading from her new book, The High Shelf, which was just published by The WordWorks. We'll also be hearing from guest poets Rocky Delaplane and Don Illich. Before we begin, I want to thank the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for helping us sponsor this event. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming in here and joining us tonight. So let's get a couple of things out of the way. First, and most importantly, if you want to purchase Nadia's book, The High Shelf, please click on the green button below. That's our call to action. And by clicking on that button, you'll be directed to go right to a place where you can purchase the book. And the same goes for our guests as well, Rocky and Don. You'll find links on that page at the call to action. And those links will lead you to places where you can purchase their books as well. And of course, we'd love for you to follow all of our reading series here at WordWorks, all of the PvP and Cafe Muse. And to follow us, all you have to do is click the follow button in the tab in the upper right corner of your screen. Now, if you want to ask a question of our poet, Nadia Colburn, when she's done, you can click on the Ask a Question button, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And you can read other people's questions, and you can vote them up the same way you could like doing a like on a Facebook page. And so this is kind of a fun thing to do. So please feel free to do this as the reading goes on. If you get a question, put it in there. You can look at them, see what other people are doing, and vote them up if you'd want. And, so that is a wonderful feature of this kind of broadcast. Also, you can remember that you are not on camera, so you don't have to worry about Zoom bombing or how you're dressed or whether your hair is combed or any of that kind of thing. But please make use of the lively chat feature, which we have here over on the right-hand side of your screen, so you can comment while the performance is going on. A couple more things. Please join us for our next Poets versus the Pandemic reading on May 27, 2020, featuring poet Julia Story, who is the author of Spinster for Hire. And please come back to our next Cafe Muse reading on Monday, June 1, 2020, which will feature the poets Tommy Blount and Molly Spencer. Finally, if you want to come back to this reading, just click on the same link that you used to get here, and you will find that the reading is archived. So if you want to come back and view it again, and just use that link or share the link with people in case you know somebody who was unable to make it here tonight and want to see it anyway. And oh yes, and you can sign up for those readings that I just mentioned because I have them in the chat. Just find them in the chat there over on the right-hand side, and you can sign up right now tonight for those readings that are being for PvP on May 27th and for Cafe Muse on June 1. Okay, so with all of that overhead out of the way, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Nadia Colburn. She has published poetry and prose in many publications, including The New Yorker, the Yale Review, Slate.com, Yes Magazine, and the American Poetry Review. That's just to name a few. Nadia has taught at a number of respected institutions, including MIT, and leads workshops all around New England. She is a student of Thich Nhat Hanh, and like our guest poet, Rocky Delaplane, she is a yoga teacher as well, and an activist interested in the intersection of personal and social transformation and the role of art in the process of change. Well, there's a lot more to Nadia's story, and you can learn about that too by clicking on the call to action down there where I've placed a link to her website, and it's a beautiful website with much information and a lot of just delightful content. So I would recommend that. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Nadia Colburn to our Crowdcast stage. And there she is. And now let me get her mic live. And Nadia, good to see you.
Hi, thank you so much.
A lot of fun preparing for this event. And I want to thank you for coming by. And if you're ready, I'm going to just turn it over to you, and I'm going to shrink down into cyberspace and let you take it away, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you. So thank you so much, Henry, for hosting this and for introducing me. Thank you all for being here. Wish I could see your faces, but I appreciate your presence. And in this time of the pandemic, I thought I would focus the reading on the contrast between feeling restricted and feeling freedom. So, taking it as really at its word, poets versus the pandemic, how can we use poetry to help us in this time of uncertainty and limitation find more freedom through the imagination, through language, and through poetry? So I thought I'd start with a poem from beloved Emily Dickinson. I often think about this poem, so I'm going to read it to you. I'm sure many of you know this poem. It's about the power of poetry. They shut me up in prose. They shut me up in prose as when a little girl, they put me in the closet because they liked me still. Still, could themselves have peeped and seen my brain go round, they might as wise have lodged a bird for treason in the pound. Himself has but to will, and easy as a star, look down upon captivity and laugh. No more have I. So, though they put her in the closet because they liked her still, she had poetry to escape to. And I think that for so many poets, poetry is a way to be more expansive, to explore the relationship, as I said, between constraint and freedom, not only in our bodies, but also within the forms of poetry themselves. And also there's something clearly also very gendered about Dickinson's poem, right? She uses the word, they liked me still. They like that little girl still. And so how can we break form in our poetry? And that's something that I'm playing with throughout my work, I think, really, and also thinking about what's the relationship between a woman's role as a woman, and the forms of freedom that are allowed to us through our bodies or in other ways. So many of the poems in my book, The High Shelf, are really about that juxtaposition between the constraints and the imagination, dealing with domestic life, the great satisfactions of it, but also the real limitations of it. And I think I was writing at the time, this book came out just now, really recently, but I wrote many of the poems many, many years ago. So it took me a long time to really complete the book and understand what it was all doing. And I think many of the poems were written out of my experience as a child, feeling both the freedom and the constraint of my early childhood home, and then kind of coming back to that as a new mother, going through pregnancy, new motherhood, and the constraints of that, and also the freedoms of that. So at the center of this book are a series of poems about boxes, which can be read in lots and lots of different ways. But now in this time of pandemic, I'm reading them again as forms of poems about being confined, like needing to stay inside. So here are a few of those poems. The feeling of trying to express the feeling I can't even name. We assembled it. We made the corners tight, a box that might hold all of us, safe from everything we wanted to escape, and creating the idea of escape itself. So a lot of these poems are pretty short, and they build on each other. So they might be somewhat hard to get just on hearing them. So if you're interested, maybe, you can get the book. But this kind of the paradox between the very things that we go to keep us safe sometimes then end up limiting us even more, which is both emotionally and physically, and not quite having language to describe that or fully know that. So a lot of these poems are dealing with what can and what can't be said in language. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about poetry is that it's the art form that's most precise about language and that also wants to interrogate language to say what language cannot say. Okay, here's another box poem. Weightlessness. In the box, there was no beginning and no end, but an openness stopped on all sides by the edges. We built it with wood and painted it, and all along there was the future, which had no one direction, and which, in the box, would never arrive at any one particular. See? Things as they are, the questions we do not ask. And here's a third box poem. This poem is after the artist Joseph Cornell, who made wonderful art from boxes. And his art also explores the juxtaposition between the freedom of the imagination and constriction. And it always seemed to me that very relevant that he lived his whole adult life with his brother, who suffered from a rather acute form of cerebral palsy and was housebound. So Cornell, like Dickinson, spent most of his life in his family home. And like Dickinson, the small pieces of art that he made are enormous in their imaginative and visionary scope. So his work really inspired a lot of the poems from this book. And this, by the way, is the book itself. The Physical World, after Joseph Cornell. There was the opposite house, not lit by the sun, the trees all dead-like, cut by the frame. And we were lying there, trying to keep ourselves, trying to keep the other, and the other trying to keep the other that was just the same, with some little variation. And the brown shingle, and the brown shingle next to it, the world inlatched, of itself made, and the boxes, the little boxes, each one just the same, with some little modulation. And in the boxes, little partitions, and in the partitions, littler partitions. And there, in one, a bird. So when I was thinking about what I wanted for the cover of my book, I thought about putting a Joseph Cornell box on the cover. But then I decided that much as I love those images, I wanted instead to hear, sorry, I'm just looked at the comments here. So I'm going to stop looking at the comments because it distracted me. I just saw that someone couldn't hear and I was like, oh no, I've been talking to an empty screen and no one can hear me, but I think it's okay. So as I said, I was thinking at first of putting a box, a Joseph Cornell box image on my cover, and that decided that I really wanted to emphasize more the space into which the bird ultimately flies. So I don't know how well you can see this, but it was really fun choosing the art. And this is from a Dutch painting, landscape painting that's in Amsterdam. And this is actually just a corner of the painting. So there's really a whole scene down below, but I just took this little corner of the sky and you can see there are these birds that are free up there in the sky. So I'm going to read you a series of bird poems now. This one is called Necessary Song. What is the world that we be in it? A catbird flies from the garbage can, a yellow twine in her mouth. She disappears into the eaves of the house, flies out, mouth empty. So this little bird that's making its nest that we just see in the corner up there going about its own life. So for a long time, especially the natural world remained a place of escape. And I think in the 21st century, we have a different relationship to the natural world because we are aware that though those birds fly free, they're also really suffering and struggling. And the continuity of the natural world that for so long humans could take for granted, we can no longer take for granted. So as we are going about our lives in our little boxes of our homes, this whole world is unfolding around us, in which there's just enormous, enormous change that's really hard even to get our minds around. And here's poetry is helpful for me again, because the environmental and climate crisis that we find ourselves in is kind of beyond almost the scope of language. And it's so interesting to be able to write something very small that looks at something very, very big, which is what I kind of like to do in my poems. So this poem is called Given. And I think that if you read it on the page, it's pretty evident what it's doing, but it might be a little bit harder to understand at first. So when you're just hearing it, so I'll tell you, it's a list of birds that have all gone extinct. And it was fun to write the poem because that list of extinct birds is very, very long. So trying to figure out what birds did I want to name and how did the names go together and what's the relationship kind of between the name of this bird that won't be seen and that we won't hear again, and the life that this bird at one time had that was only named by humans. There's just the relationship between the natural world and naming is very interesting to me also. So this poem is called Given. King Island emu, Mariana mallard, pink-headed duck, Labrador duck, New Zealand quail, double-banded argus, Hawkins rail, red-throated wood rail, white-winged sandpiper, Eskimo curlew, Colombian grebe, Bermuda night heron, Ascension night heron, New Zealand little bittern, small St. Helena petrel, large St. Helena petrel, St. Helena dove, passenger pigeon, silvery pigeon, Mariachis blue pigeon, Rodriguez gray pigeon, Bonin wood pigeon, Selu bleeding heart, black-fronted parakeet, society parakeet, paradise parrot, night parrot, Cupid red macaw, Cuban night, laughing owl, Alpharos hummingbird, imperial woodpecker, Brace's emerald, Gould's emerald, bushwren, red sea swallow, white-eyed river martin, Rook's blue flycatcher, bay starling, mysterious starling, black lord waxbill, whose songs we do not hear. So I name those birds to celebrate them as well and to celebrate our world, to lament what is happening, to lament our part in what is happening, but also to I only lament what is happening because it's precious and it has inherent meaning. So I go to poetry really in some ways as a place to praise, even amidst all the difficulties of being alive. And this is a newer poem. This book, The High Shelf, explores a lot more of the issues than I'm reading here. There are a lot of poems about the body, about women's experiences, about motherhood, but I wanted to read some new poems because I haven't really read some of these before and I thought it would be fun. So this is a poem called Where the Light Enters. And it uses the word God, and it also interrogates that word. Where the light enters. And suddenly I could not stop. God, I said. What good is language, part of me wondered. But I did not stop. God, I said from deep inside me. Outside, it was almost dawn. The birds, whose name I do not know, awake in all the trees, calling. This was not a word I had grown up to say. My mind quiet before the growing sounds. What does it mean? Unspeakable? A channel into the dark? Not what others have said, but from its own question mark. A conduit, like a river feeding into the ocean's embrace, or like the birds who have opened all their throats once and then again and again, as if their pitch were tuned to my own inner instrument, struck, each one singing, asking for nothing inside my heart. And here is a poem of spring, because it's spring. And it's called Spring. It's not just the day, but the leaves, the vines, the trees that have their new beginnings, honeysuckle, first spring detritus putting out new shoots, tender silver tendrils with a single pink bud, a promise of nectar, this one lifetime in which you will break off the tip of the flower and suck off the juice. Okay, I'm going to read another poem quickly. This is called Inscape. The light comes in even as I lie in bed. Tomorrow it will storm. All the trees will be bathed in white. And I, not sleeping, feeling empty, wishing for something more. Look, beside me my husband sleeps so close. My children sleep in their rooms. But I think life offered something different. All around me, the large houses of the rich sit through the night. I, who wanted to chart my own course. Tomorrow I will teach Hopkins. I do not think I have ever seen anything more beautiful than the bluebell I have been looking at, he writes, May 18th, 1880. I know the beauty of our Lord by it. The head is strongly drawn over, backward, and arched down. The lines of the bell strike, rayed, but not symmetrically. Some lie parallel. As I lie in bed, my head drawn down, rayed with the ones I love, with my own being. At this particular angle, I am what I am. What Hopkins calls inscape. He writes, their inscape mixed of strength and grace. Oh, hold me with strength and grace. Snow outside preparing, deep under the earth, the bluebells too, in their beds, asleep. So I am sharing with you a number of poems about poetry, and I thought it might be kind of fun and different to invite you to take a few minutes and write your own poem, because I really believe that poetry is kind of a participatory art, and that the more we read and listen to poetry, the more fun it is to write and explore our own poetry. And I love leading people and writing poems. And often what I do is I lead a little meditation first. What I found in my own life and then as a teacher is that most of us have been trained as writers in school. And in school, the intellect is really prioritized over other parts of our being. And in many indigenous cultures around the world, humans are thought to have mind, body, emotions, and spirit, right? Like we're multi-dimensional, and our writing often gets associated with just the intellect, and so the mind kind of gets cut off from the body and from the emotions and from the spirit. And what we get then is we get a culture whose stories are also kind of fragmented and not whole, not representing us in our wholeness, with our multiplicity and our multidimensionality. So for me, meditation is a way to come back to wholeness, to reconnect the mind and the body through awareness of the breath. And I find that when I reconnect mind and body, that emotion and spirit there to come, whatever other forms you want to talk about to it, like in Kundalini Yoga, which I practice, it's thought that we have 10 bodies. So, these are all really metaphors for talking about what it means to be a human in this amazing, complicated world of ours. But I'd like to, if that's okay with you, leave you in a very short meditation, and then I will read a poem, one of my poems, and give you a short prompt and give you just a few minutes to write, and then I will come back and read just 2 more poems, and then we'll have a few other readers, which will be lovely also, and I'm excited to hear too. So take us a minute to get comfortable. Take a nice deep breath. I have a singing bowl here. I'm going to ring it. And when you hear that bell, it's like a reminder to come back to awareness of your breath, and to the integration of mind, body, emotion, spirit. So perhaps you want to put your hand on your heart. And let your breath just be however it is, just notice it. One of the things that really I've learned so much from meditation is just sitting with what is, trying not to be judgmental, and just noticing how things are always changing. Sometimes it's really comfortable to be in meditation. Sometimes it's comfortable. We're shifting in and out of things. It's never really stagnant. Even when we feel like it's stuck, things are always shifting. It took me a long time to learn that. So take a few breaths here. Your mind wanders, bring it back to the breath. So nice to give our minds just a little break. It's time to sit in quiet. Okay, I'm going to read you this poem. Midwinter night. My throat is a fire. My throat is a line of birds waiting to rise up from still water. My throat is the earth, dark and heavy with spring rain. Is the air, as the mist lifts, sighing, longing for your embrace. So my invitation to you is to write a poem, whatever you want. And if you want a little prompt, to take a body part, whether it's your throat, your fist, your eye, and repeat that my blank is 3 times in the poem. And just have fun. I'm just going to give you just a few minutes here. And I like to remind people as they're writing to stay connected to your body, because so often we split mind and body. Take another minute or two here, and we'll come back together. I hope that was fun. I found that when I can bring my meditation practice and my writing practice together, my writing flows much more easily. And I've really led thousands of students through this process now. And this really shifts our relationship to writing so that we kind of get into the grain with it instead of going against the grain. And we don't need lots and lots of time necessarily to sit down and write something. We create the conditions that are helpful for us, and then we can write. So maybe those conditions weren't the conditions that are helpful for you. For many people, it is. But I encourage you to really experiment with what's a helpful way, like what are conditions that are helpful for you to write. And you're here because you want to hear poetry. So I guess that you probably also will enjoy writing poetry, and probably many of you are poets as well. So yeah, I just like to make it a little bit more participatory. I'm going to end with just 2 more poems, and then there'll also be some time for questions. Okay. So this is a recent poem, and it's called Love in the Pandemic. I wonder what it's about. Every kiss that was ever kissed, every smile, every baby's delight, a first step, a face that hides and comes back, a belly laugh, every morning of gladness, gladness, that self-same word we know because we felt it, every today, every yesterday for 100 years, 1,000, 10,000 years, languages now no one speaks, every grace, every kindness, every head that bends down close to another to listen, every unchronicled act of bodies helping bodies so long gone, we cannot even begin to count the occasions. Every one is framed by great suffering, by deceit, by threat, by death. No open plain of justness, of rightness, no guarantee of tomorrow. But still, your lips upon my lips, your hand on the small of my back, my neck, my cheek, just so, outside of language, in every language, across every inch of time and space, joy, beauty, thanks. On the long path through the meadows where the forests burned, through the grasslands, the stands of evergreens, the dark woods, through cities, abandoned lots, old minefields, oil fields, we make our journey. On and on we go, again, stumbling into love. And my last poem, called Poetry. It was such an ordinary day. I had to pay attention so that no car door opened on me, so that no one turned into my lane as I was biking. And suddenly the sky, as if it were an invitation or a mouth singing deep-throated praise to all beings, or my own desire satisfied. The sky, I tell you, as I turned the corner, suddenly opened, and the light from between the clouds, like long arms, with thin hands and long fingers, invited. I biked on. The orange light kept streaming between the gray clouds. I got to my destination. I parked my bike. But I had this place to put my thanks, today, on this page, now. So, thank you. I appreciate you all listening. I hope you had some fun writing, and I'm very open to any questions.
Thank you, Nadia. That was a wonderful reading, and I really appreciated that. You know, because we get tight. We got all kinds of screens that we're looking at in this pandemic. We're doing Zoom. We're doing this kind of a thing, and it was just so. At first, it was a little scary, but it was so rewarding to just take a minute to be with ourselves, inside ourselves. Wonderful, wonderful meditation. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's see. I don't think we got a question. Okay, let's go and take it. This comes from a Karen Alanier, and it is, Nadia, at what age did you start writing poems?
I actually started writing poems when I was really young. My dad was a poet, and he used to read poetry to me and my sister. So my sister and I used to write poems as presents to our parents for birthdays or holidays. And then I started writing poetry more seriously. I guess towards the end of college, when I graduated from college. But then when I got pregnant and had my first child, that's really when I said, I really want to be writing. Pregnancy and early motherhood really called me to write. And it was partly because I had something to say, and it was also partly because I had no idea what to say, and I felt like, whoa, it was totally beyond language. Yeah.
Very good, very good. I was I'm looking through the chat, and people were writing about their spine. I'm just trying to see a couple of the things that people wrote about, and that's so exciting to be part of a participatory process. So thank you again, Nadia. Oh, and it looks like we have another question coming up. Let's see what we have here. Oh, this is from Jenny. She asks, where do you teach?
So thanks for asking that. So I teach a lot of classes online. For those of you who liked that meditation and writing time, I often run meditation and writing challenges, and I have a course that's all meditation and writing. And I also, on my website, if you go to my website, which is nadiacolburn.com, and I think there's a link to it, I also have a free ebook that's called Embrace Your Story, which has a kind of whole method for more mindful writing, to write with more ease and power. But it really is a kind of, I put a lot of work into that book too. And in that book, there's also a recording that has a meditation and a writing session. So there's a lot of information on my website. And I also teach, now everything I do is online, but I also teach workshops at Grove Street. I teach privately in Cambridge. I have a kind of Align Your Story writing school. So there's lots of opportunities on my website. You can see more. Thanks.
Thank you again, Nadia. The website you can get to from the call to action button. And thanks again. And thanks in poetry. And now let's go and see from our guest poets. Thanks again. Okay, so now in this part of the program, we get to see some of my good friends and people who are, oh, and there's one of my best friends right there. A person who I have written with over the years and worked together at Cafe Muse with, somebody who is really special for me. And her first book of poetry, The Local World, was published in 2019 by WordTech Editions, and it was awarded one of the top 10 poetry books in 2019 by Beltway Poetry Quarterly. Her poems have appeared in Poet Lore, Beltway Poetry Quarterly, the Euphrastic Review, Innisfree, International Literary Quarterly, the Northern Virginia Review, Potomac Review, Tinderbox, and elsewhere. Her poems have won the Best of the Net, 2015, first place in the Bethesda Literary Festival Poetry Contest, 2014, and first place in the Northern Virginia Review Contest, 2013. So there it is, The Local World. And I really like this portion of the program where I get to highlight some local poets and poets who are my friends. But I'm going to turn this camera over to Rocky. And
thanks, Henry. Hang on, still working on my technology. Good evening, friends. Thank you, Nadia, for your loving poems and that great meditation and grounding. Thank you, Henry, for inviting me to read. We need poetry at this time of great loss and social isolation. I lost 3 surrogate moms who I grew up with in the community of Bannockburn last weekend, 2 in their 90s, 1 almost 101. Strong, creative, activist women who left a deep imprint on my heart. How do we console our losses? By remembering. This poem, my first poem, is dedicated to my grandpa, my mom's father, Grandpa Bill. He was born on this day over a century ago. It references the Potomac River, where I spent a lot of my childhood. I recently learned that Potomac is derived from a longer name, Patawomeck, and there is an existing Patawomeck tribe and language. Some members live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and they are preserving and passing on their language to the younger generation. Patawomeck. Buy yellow galoshes from the Sears catalog and brown rubbers I wore on rainy days to protect my penny loafers and Mary Janes. Goodbye, golden Victrola I pressed my ear to as my mother played her 78s and 33 LPs. Gershwin and the Haywards, Porgy and Bess. Duke Ellington's Black, Brown, and Beige. Goodbye to my father's carved ebony chess set. Goodbye, uncles home from the war smoking Pall Malls and Lucky Strikes. Goodbye, Grandpa Bill, who smoothed the crease of his gray felt fedora with nails buffed and trimmed. Goodbye to Grandpa Roy, who dove off a high platform when the circus came to town, helped his mom in the bakery after his father abandoned them. Goodbye to my great Aunt Bertha, who passed along quilts dating back to the Civil War. Goodbye, Delaplane boys who joined the Union Army and never returned, though we have a few brass buttons from a uniform. Goodbye to the Indian arrowheads they found along the riverbank. Goodbye to the Algonquian tribes who named the river above the falls Cohangaruton, honking geese, and south of the falls Patawomeck, river of swans. Goodbye to words they traded in, now forgotten, forbidden. No one wrote them down. Goodbye, glaciers that smoothed the rocks at Great Falls, leaving tiny white shells in the crevices and folds. This poem was inspired by Nadia's catbird poem. This is my catbird poem, and it's called Invoking Sanctuary. A man I once loved keeps leather gloves in his truck for moving dead animals off the road. No human energy deters him. I think of him when I see the body of a female catbird on Reno Road near the corner of 39th, riding my bicycle home from work. The bird's wing is sticking up, still attached. As cars speed by, the wing flutters, the way my bike shudders, or is it my heart when a truck or bus passes too close? The bird's dry body is mashed, its beak open. The feet clutch empty space, as if remembering their perch. The gray feathers blend in with the hot July pavement. I count and recount the wing feathers. 8. 3 days ago, a woman, 22, biking to work near DuPont Circle, was hit, dragged, killed by a garbage truck. My old lover would have buried the bird, dug a grave, hummed over her bones. I like that about him, the way he attends to the fallen. But I leave her there as she is, a creature who once sang, once flew, her sail raised. That night, I dream I pick up a wounded fledgling and shroud her in a white cloth. I climb on my bike and leave the known world. Our mouths open. Noisier than catbirds, we head into a wind, singing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. Very, very, very nice, and very, very well done. Okay, let me. I shall take you down into the into the darkness of this show here, and let me bring up Dawn. This is another poet who I have had the pleasure many times to hear, and one of the regular open micers at Cafe Muse and elsewhere. So this is Don Illich, whose work has appeared in literary journals such as the Iowa Review, LIT, Nimrod, Passages North, Rattle, and the Six Finch. His previous publications include 2 chapbooks, The Rocket Children and The Art of Dissolving. He is a writer-editor working in Rockville, Maryland, and his first full-length collection is a WordWorks book, The Chance Bodies, published by the WordWorks in 2018, and is available for purchase, as is Rocky's and Nadia's in the green button down there. So, Don, with all of that said, I'm going to say take it away, and I will get out of.
Okay. Thank you, Henry. My first poem is Nebraska. All over Nebraska, a fearsome angel dangles over a manufactured forest. Blue pills of cars rush every highway. Skateboarders realize life is so flat, they don't know if they can perform tricks anymore. Corn's breathing keeps families up as they try to dream of pigs. All over Nebraska, tiny people called children forget about hide and seek, smear each other with mud. Criminals carve soap pistols hoping they might escape through the imagination. The sky has not moved for 50 years, a painted still life of clouds and lightning. All over Nebraska, football is played to decide who will live and die, who will be buried in the parking lot, and who will be crowned with sheaves of wheat. People happily chloroform themselves rather than stay up at night. Truck drivers slam brakes when they see UFOs, letting out passengers dazzled by lights. We believe in Nebraska. Its dotted border exists. Inside it, we will be at peace. A corn maze surrounds us as we sleep. Next poem is called Residence. The house is burning. We can all see that except for the occupants who continue to eat dinner, to sing happy birthday, to shout out their favorite pudding. We could run in, rescue them ourselves, remove their bodies like they are ancient Greek vases found in Smithsonian museums. Or we could recall that human life is the prime value, that a grandmother is adored by her grandchild, that she's a neighbor to a baker, lawyer, candlestick maker, or that she doesn't need to be anything to anyone. Except we just stand there, looking through windows, jealous of the residents, that they can keep chewing lamb, singing silly songs from TV, while we're scared to put on the news, imagining the newscaster's head exploding with one more piece of terror, his hair on fire, the studio beginning to go up in flames. And I'm going to read the poem from the prompt, which I guess is perhaps kind of a crazy thing to do because I haven't had a chance to do any revision. But, why not? I'm going to call this Dumb Birds. Dumb birds can't stop cawing and getting caught. The cat promising it will use its claws. Stupid, stupid. Running into windmills. Shot for dinners. Eggs lost or stolen. You're not even beautiful, not anymore. You fly. You fly. Dumb birds. We would be with you. Thanks.
Okay, Don, thank you. And let's see if we can get everybody back here. So for one last, here we go. And finally our feature poet tonight. And you inspired Don to write a poem there. And I'm sure you inspired a lot of poetry from everybody. Thank you so much. I want to just give a real hand. Let everybody out there see our great poets tonight. They did a wonderful job. I had a wonderful evening. And so wave goodbye, folks. That's it. And now I'm going to turn you guys down. And so I can close the show. Thanks again, Nadia. All right. So please join us for our next Poets versus the Pandemic on Wednesday, May 27, 2020, where we're going to feature poet Julia Story, who's going to be reading from her book, Spinster for Hire. And please join us on June 1, 2020, when Cafe Muse will feature the poets Tommy Blount and Molly Spencer. Let me thank Nadia Colburn, Rocky Delaplane, and Dawn Illich one more time for a tremendous reading. And let me thank the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for their sponsorship of this series. Let me thank you again for coming out and enjoying it with us. And remember, stay safe. Thank you.